Hi everybody. I have some properties of exponents for you that I'm going to explain on the next couple of slides. So what I'd like for you to do is I would like for you to pause and I'd like for you to write down these 6 properties of exponents. Now your book gives them names, but the names aren't as important to me as you knowing how to use them. So we'll get into that. So now would be a good time for you to pause and write down these 6 properties of exponents. I took some time for you to pause. All right, here are 6 examples, one for each rule, one for each property of exponents. So one for multiplication, division, raising multiplication to a power, raising division or a fraction to a power, raising a power to a power, and when you have negative exponents. I'm going to explain each one, but now would be a good time to pause and write them down. All right, so the first power is called, or the first property is called the product of powers rule. And it's what you do when you multiply the same base together with 2 different exponents. What's really important here is that the bases have to be the same. So this works with x and x, but it wouldn't work if I did x times y. So the reason that this works is that x squared really means x times x. X cubed really means x times x times x. If I'm going to multiply those 2 groups together, I'm going to have 5 total. So the way that I find out how many total is I add the exponents. 5x's multiplied together is x to the 5th. All right, so I'd like for you to try this problem. X to the 4th times x to the 7th. Answer should be x to the 11th. Hopefully you got that one. All right, the next one is called the Quotient of Powers rule, and it follows the same type of pattern. If instead of multiplying, you're dividing, then instead of adding the powers together, you should subtract them. So here's a quick and easy example. If I have x to the 6th over x squared, that really means 6x's multiplied together over 2x's multiplied together. Now, you could cancel out top to bottom, x over x and x over x. You're reducing out 2x over x's there, and you're left with just 4x's. So the answer is x to the 4th. That's the reason that property works. So you try this one. X to the 9th over x cubed. Hopefully you got x to the 6th. I bet you did. All right, moving on. The power of a product. Now remember, product means multiplied together. So this is A times B. They're being multiplied together, and then I'm going to square. What's really important to notice here is that the parentheses are enclosing the 3 and the x. So what that means is that both of those are being squared. So when you square something, it means you multiply it times itself. 3x times 3x. Now, we know from our earlier multiplication of terms that we multiply the real number parts, the 3's. We get 9, or even in the intermediate step, 3 squared. And we multiply the x's. X times x makes x squared, so we're going to get 9x squared. So here's a little challenging one for you. If you take 2x and you cube it, what do you get? Well, you should get 2 cubed times x cubed, or 8x cubed. All right, the power of a quotient rule is really similar. I'm going to use a real number example for this one after I use the variables. So x over y squared, that means x over y times x over y. Now you know how to multiply fractions, right? You know, you take the top times the top, and you take the bottom times the bottom. So we've got a top times top situation here. X times x. It's going to give me x squared. And the bottom times the bottom makes y squared. Now we don't know anything about x or y, so we can't simplify that or anything. We're just going to get x squared over y squared. So if I gave you 3/4 squared, 3/4 squared is 3/4 times 3/4, or 9/16. That is 3 squared over 4 squared, 9/16. All right, home stretch. The power of a power. So if I've got something like x to the 7th cubed, that means x to the 7th times x to the 7th times x to the 7th. I'm cubing it, so that means I take one thing and multiply by itself 3 times. X to the 7th times x to the 7th times x to the 7th. Now the very first rule that we learned means that this should be x to the 7 plus 7 plus 7. Well, that's 21. The reason this works is that this repeated addition is multiplication. So 7 plus 7 plus 7 is 7 times 3, or 21. So if I take x to the 4th and I square it, I should get x to the 8th. All right, final one, the negative exponent rule. If I have x to a negative power, that's the same thing as 1 over x to that power. So x to the negative 5th is 1 over x to the 5th. If I have 3 to the negative 2, that is 1 over 3 squared, or 1/9. 1/9. All right, so you try. What is 4 to the negative 2? Hopefully you get 1/16. All right, important rule that you probably already know is the zero exponent. If you raise any number that isn't 0, so a can't be 0 here, if you raise it to the 0 power, you get 1. So 10 to the 0 equals 1. 20 to the 0 equals 1. 107 to the 0 equals 1. 212 to the 0 equals 1. Fantastic. Thanks for watching.